Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Event Space. You are tuned into another episode of The Joy of the Journey, hosted by Sony. This is, of course, a wonderful series featuring our good friend, and as we often joke with him, the Event Space's own therapist, Chris Orwig. So, Chris, what's going on? Welcome back.
Yeah. Welcome to the session. So let's talk about your mother. No, I'm just
I missed you last week, man. It didn't feel, wasn't the same.
Oh, it wasn't, but it was so great having Fred on, and he's just so deep and wise and thoughtful and everything. So I'm super excited about today and to get to connect. I mean, one, that's a big highlight. Two, there was that neat Sony event in New York. I wasn't able to be there, but we could talk about that a smidge. But mostly to kind of get into this, I'm going to call it the dark side of joy.
Mm.
Which what I mean by that is there's this great quote. It's by an ancient Greek philosopher. I'm forgetting. I think it's Plutarch who said, "Music to find harmony must investigate discord." And I think what the quote is kind of saying is this idea of like, let's not just be all happy, snappy, positive all the time, but let's also explore some of those notes that don't quite work, that don't fit together, and then that can help us find harmony in a new way, if that makes sense. So that's
Totally.
kind of the space I'm bringing in the moment.
I like that because I think we always think this linear road to happiness. And
Yes,
to kind of piggyback off what you just mentioned, I think you can probably speak to this as well. Some of the
yeah,
greatest stuff we create, for creators, we tap in during our lowest moments and our
yes,
times of despair and times of, a lot of artists experience mental health issues. And some of
yes.
those times when you're struggling, I think it pushes us to another level and we'd rather feel something than nothing at all. And I think it's where you feel the strongest, whether it's this end of the spectrum or this end of the spectrum, is where you find some of your greatest work.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And also, as you know, the title is this joy, and Fred last time kind of helped actually key me into this, but this idea that it's there is a we have a big human experience, right? And to get to joy, kind of to your point, um, you can't just ignore tough stuff, but really lean into it. And maybe a quick story. My daughter is studying abroad in Spain right now. So much fun.
Awesome.
Third year of college. In the first few months, she's been to Italy and Rome and Amalfi Coast to Amsterdam a couple weekends ago, Paris last weekend, the Oktoberfest, every weekend going somewhere, living life. But she was having a really hard time. She had a really hard situation with one of her friends she's traveling with. And that happens when you travel, right? Because you're close quarters and, all those things. And I was talking to her about, she was kind of, calling for like dad advice, right? Which when you're a dad, you love when you get those calls because you're like, one, you're just like, I'm here for you, Annie, I'll listen. But then near the end of the call, I was I was talking to her about what my one of my mentors said to me. He said, "Chris, never waste the hard stuff you go through." And he said, "Your best work as a photographer is going to come from like the source, the fuel of your best work. It's going to come from the hardest things you go through." And so then I was kind of saying that's what Taylor Swift does. Our family, we're all Swifties. And I'm like, Taylor Swift, her boyfriend does something horrible, breaks up with her. She feels it really deeply. So she investigates the discord. She then does something creative from that, converts it into music. That I imagine helps her process in the moment and also later, because you can kind of reflect back on it. And then also helps others feel that as well. And great artists know this. They're like, do not waste the hard stuff you go through in life, whether that's grief or, I don't know, just some small inconvenience. Because what that does is it tunes us in, I think, to the greater, bigger human experience. And if our photographs can contain that, they connect. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear your thoughts reflecting on that.
I totally agree. And I think we humans, there's certain ideas and constructs that they resonate with people for a reason. And I think that grief and pulling from our low moments and creating something out of that. For a lot of people, it's the connection to someone who's feeling the same thing, and to
Yes.
someone where it's like, I get it, where it's like you pull up a sad song, and sometimes it's like, all right, the sad song really might connect more than a song that is about love, because it's like, okay, love is good. It doesn't really need any positive additives. It doesn't need, an extra couple teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah.
But pain does. Pain, you need that to feel connected. And sometimes there's that lonely side of things where it's like you don't really necessarily need to connect, but others will connect to it. And others
Yes.
will see what you create from your loneliness, and it's like this feeling of solidarity. It's when you're in a car
Yeah. Yeah.
and people want to hear music that everyone knows and is recognizable and everyone knows the
Yes.
lyrics to, rather than it might be a great song but no one's ever heard it, but that's
Yeah.
not the time to introduce them to something new. They want the familiarity. And I think it, for me, I think it's born a lot of this need and this want to connect.
Hmm. Oops. Sorry. Oh, here I am, this need and this want to connect. Yeah. And then ultimately, maybe, photography and part of what that little sound was is I just preparing something that I want to share, but I realized it has audio in it, so I was trying to just silence the audio so we wouldn't hear it. But of course, instead of silencing it, I made I made the audio play. But yeah, and then maybe to give more context to this, just kind of my own life journey and experience and where I'm at is Derek, I don't think you and I have had a chance to talk this, but my dad recently passed away, and he was this huge person in my life. And we had his memorial this last weekend. There were 400 people there. And then we had an open house at our house with kind of people we invited, like a smaller group of 100 people, and it was just like this overwhelming big experience. And I built this slideshow for the memorial. And what I wanted to do was just scroll through a couple images in it. And the reason I wanted to do this, and this is where I mean going dark. So some people maybe think like going dark, like, what do I hate about photography? We could do that too. Um, actually, in that, I have actually thought about that. I've thought about photography because maybe I'll go there for a second. What I've experienced through losing my dad is that it brings paradoxical experiences very close. So you can be grieving and very sad, but you can also be so grateful and so full of love, like in the same moment. And so in photography, I think one of the things is it can take you out of the moment, but then right next door, it can really bring you into the moment. And so what this loss experience has helped me realize is that photography is many things, and learning to kind of pay attention to those and even ask yourself, like, is this taking me out of the moment right now? Or is this bringing me in? Versus just saying photography brings me in, because that's kind of a lot of what I talk about and what I realize, like, life is better with camera in hand and all these things, and I believe that. But then also I think grief or loss can help us refine maybe our approach to life, because you're kind of like, okay, yes, and does that make sense?
Totally. Totally. I mean,
um
you're it's another level that you're tapping into. And it's
yes.
a level that you can't go to so easily. You can't force yourself into that level. It's kind of one of those levels that life will throw it at you,
Yes.
and you may not see it coming, but you respond to it, and you have
Yes.
no choice but to respond. And I think what you're tapping into is responding to it in a way that is very profound. And I mean, like everything, Chris, you never just scrape the surface. You're
Yeah.
the person who asks questions, and you really look for a deeper meaning. And I think that's why you're able to go into that dark side and pull out something positive from it.
Yeah, and maybe also because, I mean, and thank you, but because I have mentors and friends like you and others who encourage that, right? And that, I think, part of what I'm hoping to do here is to encourage us to again, like Plutarch said, investigate discord, like investigate these things. And then to take advice from my late mentor, who was like, don't waste these hard moments. And I'd always heard this idea, and he talked about this as well, but that melancholy can be a great asset for a photographer. I think maybe we've talked about that, but what I mean by that is, and wait, I'll just say what I mean, but also know everything I'm saying is coming from some other source, right? It's not like this is original content. But it's hard to always keep quoting back other people. So anyway, and imagine you're like super happy and joyful and just beboppity, everything's great. You walk into a room, maybe like my little office here, and you're just like, yeah, this is amazing. It's so great to see you and all this kind of stuff. But if you have a little melancholy, you walk in and you're like, huh, that's really interesting, that object or that color or that texture. And that melancholy can be a little spacious and a little slow. So what my mentor would say is like, don't like if you're not feeling like A plus today, you're feeling kind of C minus. That might be where one of your best photographs ever comes from. Embrace it. Lean into it. Do not waste it. Do not like slap on the smile and just bebop around. It can give you this sensitivity to something that's in the room, like metaphorically, literally, energetically, or whatever. And I've always found that to be helpful because as a photographer, and I think you can relate to this as well, it's easy to beat yourself up. Like, how am I going to do this? This isn't going to work, and all that. And in a sense, I think that's slight negativity, right? It's darkness. It's not like I got this, I'm confident, I've been doing this for 2 decades, I got my favorite camera, my favorite lens, I got this great subject, nailed it. It's more of a question. And what my mentor would always say is kind of lean into that, and lean into those things and let them be part of your process. And the first time I did that, I tried that. I was photographing one of my heroes, and I told him, I just have to tell you, I'm really nervous right now, which is usually you don't break that barrier as a photographer. You don't, you want to make your subject, you want to be confident so they feel confident. They want to be comfortable so they feel comfortable. You want to be like, we got this, no problem. Yeah. But I was like, I'm really nervous. He's like, well, why are you nervous? I'm like, well, I admire you so much. I've looked up to you for so many years. And so I'm just nervous that I won't get it right. And he's like, oh, Chris, we got this. And suddenly he was on my side. Of course he was, right? Of course he wasn't like, oh, great. Now I have some photographer guy who's nervous. It was more of like, he was like, we got this. Let's do this. And we started this thing. And I think if I had just been nervous and trying to do the photo, I probably wouldn't have gotten what I got. And it's one of my all-time favorite photos too. And I think it came from my vulnerability and then also him responding to that. I mean, he could have responded negatively. He could have been like, buck up, kid, or something. I don't know. And that might have helped in a different way. But the point is to create space for duality. I'm going to go another place as I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this quote by E.M. Forrester. And the quote says that great literature allows us to feel multiple emotions at once. And as a portrait artist and photographer, I don't want kind of one and done. I don't want like, oh, I got it. I want that complexity. And so what that writer was talking about was that there can be a character which is just maybe so beautiful and romantic, but also very sad. And so you're like connect to this character because they're not just like really beautiful, or something. Or there can be a character, I mean, we could just go silly here too. There's Harry Potter, right? Who's like, you can't just say like, well, Harry Potter is great and everything worked out well for him. He had a lot of self-doubt. He had times where he yelled at his best friends who were doing all this good stuff for him. So there's the people who can write well, and I think who can do photography well, can say, yeah, yes, this image has this quality, but then a couple others as well. So it allows spaciousness for those things to be present. And that then I think as the viewer allows us to connect with it because we're like, that's real, isn't it? You know what I mean? And there's a lot of like studies on this, like character studies, like why do we like Han Solo from, well, I just ask you, I'll be curious to hear your response. Why do people like Han Solo as a character from the original Star Wars? We'll just go way back to that one and how he shows up. And why do we like him maybe, or when Princess Leia says, you know, so Han, I love you, and he says, I know, you know, or why do we love him? You know, what do we love about him? What are your thoughts on that?
I
No right or wrong here. And if you don't love him, that's fine too, you know.
no, I think we love complexity. We love contrast. We love relatability.
Hmm.
And I think in certain ways there's all of that baked in.
Hmm.
And you look at everything. I'm going to make a very really general statement
Sure.
in answering this, in that, kind of like centering on those things. Look at photography.
Yeah.
You you need the dark to balance the light. You
Hmm.
can't enjoy sweet without tasting sour. All these cliches that we've heard our entire life relate to, movie character, like bring it back to movie characters. We love characters who are vulnerable and complex, who they don't offer us one dimension.
Hmm.
When we see a character and it's all good, what do we in the back of our minds are like, they can't be all good. Something's got to be there. I'm
Right.
waiting for something to turn. When someone is brash or a little bit bold, we like that. We like the villain. We seize the villain. Joker. Look at Joker. We
Yeah.
love, the Joker. We wanted the bad guy to win. And I think you find that so many times in movies that we need that that discord. We need that. You have to hear, you don't know what on beat is if you haven't heard offbeat. And how many great things have come into fruition or have been invented by something being done wrong, or someone missing a step, or an unforeseen circumstance. If this makes sense at all, or if I'm just
Yeah.
really out
No,
of my
this is it.
gourd right now, I think we don't like predictable.
Yeah.
We like the twist in the movie. We like to be kept on our toes. We like when a plot shifts and we thought we knew what was going on, and then they threw us for a loop. I think
Right.
that intrigue, if you look at the very heart of existence, no one knows really anything in the grand scheme of things. There's no owner's manual to being a photographer. There's no owner's manual to being a human being or to even existing. It's like, why are we here? What are we doing? Why are Chris and I
Right.
talking right now?
Right.
And it's, I think, that constant search for answers and for purpose. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And we
We
say
talk about it
also
offline all the time.
off, yes, we talk about it
And
offline.
online.
Yes, it's like, and then we always, once we mention it, we're like, and we also always say that, like, we talk about it all the time, but it's like, it's so
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah.
And, it's something that always comes up because it always does have
Yeah.
relevance. And I think that when people start tapping in, how many people are just living in the ether? And
Yeah.
they're just floating around and they don't really have a purpose, and they don't really question, and they don't really work on awareness and self-awareness and tapping into, well, why am I doing this? And to bring that back to photography before everyone's like, get this guy checked out,
Yeah.
take him
Yeah.
off camera right now, bring him
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
um I've That's one thing that you've introduced into my work in my life, Chris, that I will am forever indebted to you for, is really starting to ask myself questions. Why am I doing this? Why am I creating this? What am I doing? What is the next
Right.
step? And not in a very baseline sense, in a deeper sense of like, what is the goal, but also, am I present for the journey?
Hmm.
And which is why we're here now talking about the journey.
Right.
It's a continual student of the game mentality that even when you made it, you're a constant student of the game. You're constantly working at yourself. You're constantly looking to evolve and understand yourself and your place in this world, your place in photography. And I think that's why we can draw inspiration from someone like you, because it's a forever. evolving, changing thing. It's never in point A to point B. And that's the more I buy into that train of thought, I've seen evolutions in my work that are only possible because I never felt like I arrived and I always knew that there was something more. Am I being fulfilled? So
Yeah.
I know that was a whole lot of word
No,
salad,
that
but
was it though. No, that was great. And it all started with Han Solo.
see where Han Solo took me. I'm like, wait, I'm in a completely different galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was amazing, man. I love it. I could listen to you all day. And one of the things, I mean, just because I brought back Han Solo, one of the things I think that I liked about him or like about that character is that he kind of there was the Force, and we're kind of getting introduced to what's this idea of the Force and young Luke, and he just like rolled his eyes. He was just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, and he was very pragmatic and practical. And so, just as we're buying into it, there's someone who's kind of like, "Really, seriously?" And I like friends like that, like who have the capacity to kind of counterbalance or auto check or whatever it is, that and I think a lot of what you were sharing about was just what I've kind of come to realize, I mean, and I'm not going to like grieve on camera and stuff, but when your dad dies, you and your craft is photography, and what you have left of your father, I mean, there's some possessions, of course. There's all the stories. Those are my most valuable thing. And then there are photographs. And the photographs help tell the story. And if anyone has ever photographed someone who's passed away, you also know this, whether it's a family member or not. You and I have talked about this before, but it really makes you realize photography is immensely valuable, wonderful, meaningful. Like, at the memorial, there were many times where I cried, other people cried. The time when the whole collective group had the most amount of emotion and cried the most was during the slideshow, right? Of course,
Mhm.
because images move us. And so, of course, I'm like dealing with things with my own life and photography, but I'm also trying to step back and be like, why is that? What is that? And let me share my screen and just show, I'll just show a couple images. I'm not gonna torture everyone with the full slideshow, but I'll just share. And there are two or three reasons why I want to share this. So let me just make sure I can do this. Here we go. It's going to look a little cluttered, but this is kind of intentionally. Can you see kind of a clutter? We have sort of Premiere and then Bridge in the background. Can you see that
Yeah.
okay?
Yep.
Okay. So one is just it's as a photographer and also a filmmaker, it's interesting to take photos you haven't seen in a long time and then bring them into another form, which is another way of storytelling, which is slideshows. We used to do slideshows as photographers all the time. I actually haven't done one in years. I do keynote decks. That's different than a slideshow. So that just one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was just thinking through like, okay, let's learn some other tools. Let's figure out how we can string stuff together. Um, and then I'll just share a story and then a couple photos. And this is a portrait I captured of my dad. It's actually the only portrait I have of him by himself. This is a goofy family photo. Um, Another family photo on my parents' anniversary, them on their wedding day. My dad is out of focus. My mom is in focus, but I love these pictures. You know, these are actually really talented photographer, I think. Mom and dad, the picture I take. And then us as kids getting pumpkins and us as kids and my dad in Hawaii. My mom must have taken this picture. You get the idea. All these different kinds of photos. And I'll stop there. But that's me in the red shirt, in our family. My dad set the camera up on the tripod and captures this moment. And so I'll exit out of this and maybe stop sharing here so we can go back. But what's interesting is I collected photos and there's tons more, right? From my own, from other people's. If we were to do a live photo critique and didn't know who these people were, 90% of the photos are not good. Right? They're missing the mark on the lighting, on the horizon lines tilted, someone's out of, just all the things that we as photographers are like, well, if we criticize, this family photograph, they're just like sitting there, or someone's hand, like you can't see their hand because it's behind their back, or we could critique them all day long. But all those critiques go, obviously, in this kind of situation, go out the window. You're like, it doesn't even matter. It's about feeling. And that's where I was like, huh, grief has the ability to um, clarify something that all photographs are about feeling. It doesn't matter. Like, yes, we want to have composition. Yes, we want to have good light. Yes, I want to have more than a plastic point and shoot camera. Yes, I want to have a great lens and great camera, all this stuff. But ultimately, if we take every little thing away and kind of just go back to the very, at least for me, the very, very basic, does it make me feel or not? If I'm just like, apathetic, it's probably not a good photo. And it was an interesting exercise to one, be in pictures, family members in pictures, because whenever we see a picture of ourselves, we look at ourselves and then we look at everyone else, you know. And in a lot of these family photos, I don't look great, for whatever reason. I'm sticking my tongue out, I'm not looking in the camera, my finger up my nose or something. But all of those things, especially those imperfect moments, are my favorite ones. And because they're also real. And I think back to what you were saying a little bit about being a human and this kind of stuff, it's like there's something real. If there's something real, believable, complex, human in an image, there's a greater chance we'll feel something. And it's okay if we're not hitting these other things. And so part of this just kind of helped me kind of put in check my pretentious photographic eye, because people would send me pictures like, Chris, this isn't really a good picture. I don't think you're going to like it. And it's like the best photo I've seen of like my dad and mom ever, not photographically, emotionally. And because I'm a photographer, people were like, I don't, and I'm just like, forget that. And then that helps me then think, okay, now how do I approach my craft? Well, one, it doesn't mean I just slough off and just say, well, it doesn't matter. But it did kind of give me a little true north, like check, like almost like my compass was a little off, but then this loss was like, got me back on course. And that felt really good. And it felt like, wow, this is a gift I gained from grief. Back to my mentor. Don't waste this stuff. I don't know what the other gifts are. I mean, they'll surface. I could list off 10 more, but it's an interesting process. Your reflections, Derek.
Well, first of all, the picture looking out for like the little like cave shot, like as a
Yes,
friend.
yes, yeah.
I mean,
In
come on,
Hawaii.
man. I was gonna ask you, you had said your mother took it. I was gonna
Yeah,
ask you, I'm like, come on,
yeah,
photography's in the family. But
yes, yes,
it's so funny that you went where you went with that. I swear, sometimes I'm like, we telepathically are inside each other's heads because
yes,
I was thinking, okay, yeah, that's a banger. That's great. But you
yes,
don't always get that. And
yes,
but I felt those images because I have such a deep connection as anyone who has ever heard me go on and on and on about my motivation for photography is my mother's
yeah, yes,
countless
yes,
albums and boxes of
yes,
4x6 prints because
yeah,
that's what really matters at the end of
yeah,
the day. And again, I go off on this all the time. It's like social media doesn't matter. Likes don't matter. Follows don't matter.
right,
What anybody else thinks about your work doesn't matter. It's how your photos make you feel. It is your DeLorean to relive your life every time you look at an image. And it's moments that you will never ever remember. A random Tuesday in April that your family
right,
got together and went down to the Purple Turtle in Utah for banana cream pie milkshakes. That's a
yes,
one that sticks
yes,
up here. Um, but it's like that's a warm spot. That's nostalgia.
yeah,
That's a smell that you smell and it takes you back someplace. It just transcends time and teleports you somewhere. That's what those images are to you. And that's why they're so powerful. And realizing that it allows you to really tap in again to the questions that we were talking about before and that always seem to come up with us. Why do I do this? What do I
yeah,
feel? Do I feel anything when I take this? The image that people might crow about and love and say, Chris, wow, this is such a beautiful image. Does
yeah,
that move the needle for you as much as any of those pictures that you just showed us? And the answer is probably no, because
yeah,
it has nothing to do with the technical side. And of course, yes, we
yeah,
both we both dance the line between creativity and education and inspiration
Yes.
and wanting people to take better images and pay attention
Yes.
to this stuff. But at the end of the day, like you said it best. You can go through a box of family photos and the composition is going to be wonky. It's might be blown out or overexposed or
Yeah.
underexposed or whatever, and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It's those are the moments that are most powerful, and sometimes you don't realize the true impact of photography until somebody does pass away, and you realize that the lion's share of what you have left are memories and photos and videos, and how all three of those things are interconnected to help you relive those moments, because ultimately it's, you touch into a different side of being where you can be present up here and you realize how strong memory is, and how important it is to keep memory alive, because ultimately it's just you want to feel good. You don't want to feel that pain. You don't want to feel despair. And these things help you grieve. They help you deal with that pain, and you may not have the physical presence. I've thought about this a lot recently, and after, when we spoke and you told me of your father's passing,
Yeah.
I started to reflect. Every one of our conversations always sits heavy with me. I always know that when I talk to you, it's my time to, okay, I gotta debrief with myself and let Chris's conversation sit with me, because
Mm.
Chris never brings like hey, I went to the store. It was cool. Nice weather out. You always bring something of value and importance. And I value that about our friendship. And I started the process about, wow, yeah, we're getting older. My parents are getting older. You know, what memories do I have to hold on? I've long questioned, it's like documenting. My mother hates having photos taken, and I always bring the
Yeah.
camera around. But then I think about all the people that I've met that have passed away, and I've had people reach out to me for images to display at the funeral. And that tells me that, wow, that image is so powerful that they want that to be among the last memories that people who are coming to pay their respects will have of this person. And that's powerful. We have we have a power and a great responsibility as photographers in documenting people that, we are the ones that are responsible for solidifying memories.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how you also said, and you never know when those memories are going to happen. Like you don't know this is some epic, important moment. Like let's say the Hawaii picture. That's a great. I love that photo. Hawaii was really important to my parents, and they passed on this love of the ocean and of those islands. And there are, now my family's favorite place in the world and all that. But when you're there, you're just like, we're there. Like you talked about the banana cream pie at the place or whatever. And so the fun thing I think as a photographer is not fun, but the thing to keep in mind, the important thing is that we could create an amazing moment. We could also not, it could just be like, nothing, or it could be, it could not have this. There's a mystery to it, is maybe what I'm getting, but there isn't like this, like faith comes up, when people die a lot. They're part of a faith community, and someone was saying the interesting thing to me about faith is that inherent to it, there's doubt, like there's uncertainty. That's what faith is. Like, do I take this leap of faith, so to speak? Like, you don't know. And I was thinking about how that relates to photography. I was like, yeah, there's a lot of faith you have to have as a photographer. You're like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to turn out. I don't know if this light's going to be right. I don't even know if this is a moment or not, but and it doesn't mean we're not confident, but I think, I mean, at least for me, I can have confidence, but also uncertainty. And again, the grieving has helped me realize those two sit right next to each other as a photographer. I can be really confident, amazing gear, but I can just be like, I don't quite know. And another one of my friends put it this way. He said, he's talking about something about like there's a spaciousness to that. And I was like, yeah, yeah. Like as photographers, we have to be available and open to what's going on, you know, in a unique way. And we also, in that, are not passive though. We're active because you can be open to what's happening and this is life and great. But as photographers, we then take one more step and we're like, we're going to do something in this moment. And as I look back at all those photos of my family and dad and friends and family, and again, it's like a 6 minute long slideshow. So a lot of photos, but and all the other ones I didn't include and blah, blah, blah. But it made me grateful that my dad used to put his camera on a tripod. He passed on the gift of photography to me. He gave me my first camera and all that. But he would make the effort, and other people would have taken the effort, taken or made. And that's what we do as photographers. We're like, we're going to take the effort. We're not totally sure, but let's do this. You guys get together, or let me capture this moment, this slight shadow. I don't even know if this is going to be some great picture. And I don't know if it's true, but you've interviewed so many people or been on these things with so many people. I would be curious to know what your thoughts are on this. Like, for all these great photographers, I know, like, did they know the photograph was going to be their all-time bestseller in the moment? My guess is no. Is that your guess as well from what you've talked with people?
Totally. Totally. I don't think we realize a lot of times. I mean, how many times are you photographing and you're so caught up in the moment?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, how many times have you been like, oh, you take a photo and you're like, that's the one. And then
Yeah.
you go back to process your images and you're going through and you're like,
Every time for me.
where was that image? Where was that image I said was the one? I can't find, and it just doesn't stand out. And you're like,
That's
and then you
nothing.
come across it and you're like, is that it? Wait, really? Oh, okay. And then there's the
Uh,
complete
yes.
different image that you're like, this is the one. So I don't think,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think we now I'm gonna throw it back on you.
Okay.
How do you feel about how does how a photo is received play
Yeah.
into how we think about this is my photo? I mean, because think about it, if a
Yeah.
photo is very well received, if it resonates with a lot of people, it obviously means it has something. But does that
Yeah.
translate to like how do you view it in the spectrum of, you
Yeah.
know, your personal, because we all have our personal
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah.
And then there's ones that are like, yeah, they're great images that people they're universally accepted as a great image. And
Yeah.
of course, there's the Venn diagram crossover area of a little bit of both. I love it, people love it, but it's kind of in no man's land.
Yeah, I think this is a huge topic. I mean, people who do commercial photography know this intimately. The client always picks the wrong picture. Like every photographer will tell you that. If only us photographers could be like, use that one, and they're like, no, I like this one. You're like, what are you thinking? The same thing's true. You photograph some family photos for people and you get the card and you're like, huh, like, okay, like it's a great photo, but it's not like the photo. And so I would say whether the client's a brand, an individual, a person, or just the client is Instagram and likes or whatever, it always confounds me. And I think a lot of photographers can relate to this, where you're just like, huh, that's so interesting. And part of that, I kind of reverse engineer like that. Why is that? Part of it, I think, is because we were there as well, and we were kind of like that moment was like really special. So our experience of it is embedded in our viewing. For someone else, they just are like, they have no idea. And then I think all of us as photographers have really refined taste. And that's what artists do, right? Or if like you're a winemaker, you have like really, really refined winemaking taste. You can just be like, wine's good, like this is fine, or whatever the space you're in. If my mom's really good at interior design, so she has a really it was funny getting the house ready for um, the memorial. It's a beautiful house my dad built himself, and it's in Northern California. And this whole huge wall is made of, it's just all windows. And it was built in the mid 70s. And you could never build a house like this anymore. It wouldn't be permitted. But back then, permitting was a little more loose. But so anyway, this big wall of windows, beautiful house, just you can just imagine. So my mom, we were like getting something ready, and there was these little pumpkins and candles on the table, and she's like, "No, I think this one should be right there." No, that doesn't work at all. And she went and got a different pumpkin and set it there and had a little thing. And I was just, and it's beautiful, but I was just kind of marveling, like I thought the pumpkins were fine. Like I didn't even notice, like I didn't think it should be a different pumpkin, right? Kind of fall decorations. And she's a painter and she's an artist, but the point is, she has a very, very keen preference, and it's very warm-hearted. It's not like, I mean, in that case, she was like, I don't like that. So it was, but doesn't criticize other people, just warm-hearted. They know what they love. And I think as photographers, there is this warmth to photography. I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at an image And I'm like, I cannot believe this. I like put it big on my screen. I like zoom into it. I'm like, and I have some prints from a little while back that I was doing that with too. I print it really big and I'm just like, yes, this is like the art, the feeling, the victory, even like this worked. Um, and so what I found is to really keep that flame alive and then just let other people, let the clients pick, let it go. If someone asks me, I'll share, but to not let go of my own preference. It's that great quote. Wait, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look this up so I get it right. It's to know, here's my keywords. There we go. And give me 1 second. It's about keeping your soul alive, which is really interesting. It's one of my favorite quotes, but I just want to get it right. This is by Robert Louis Stevenson. It says, to know what you prefer instead of humbly saying amen to the world. What the world tells you you ought to prefer is to have kept your soul alive. To know what you prefer instead of basically saying what the world tells you you should like or dislike keeps your soul alive. And I think there's a soulfulness, there's a life, there's a vitality to having those preferences. And so I think bringing up that topic is super important, because there are, so many people, and when I coach people and work with them, there's people who just what keeps their soul alive is a journalistic style. No one knows the camera is there. They like that 35 millimeter look. They like whatever. Other people, they like just compression and big long lenses and this heightened experience. It's not quite as subtle. Once you have a big lens, subtlety, at least in my, it seems like it's out the door. It's more like, wow, versus like, huh, but to know that is what leads you to greatness. And so for me, what I feel like has happened is all of my photo knowledge was just like, kind of like, when someone dies, it's like almost like there's a clearing. It like kind of removes things and nothing else matters for those moments, especially really right after it. And so it almost cleared away everything that mattered with photography. I'm like, nothing matters with photography. And then I'm like, okay, all that matters is feeling. Do I feel this? And what is this feeling that I have here? And now I have to kind of reconstruct those other things. But my preference is like so strong now. It's like I'm not even gonna, if it doesn't, like, what defines a keeper for me, it's that quality. And that has been, like I said, kind of like fixing my true north. It's almost like your wheels are out of alignment a little bit or something. It's like, I am like, no, I am so in and on. And so when I use a camera now, and just to, I know I'm going on this whole thing for me, and I'm in this really raw moment, but now it's like all about my heart. So that's where I would say feeling for me comes from. It's not necessarily my mind, is this right? Are the things right? But it's like, my heart, I think, when you lose someone, your heart's really cracked wide open. It's really tender. It's very fragile. And so I'm not going to just go back to like, nailed it, got it, did all my things I've always done. I'm going to more listen to my heart. And I've said these things over the years, but, I think it's Helen Keller who said it's only with the, wait, I got to look up my quotes. Let me do one more. Because hopefully these are people enjoy these. Only, um, okay, here she is. Here's her quote. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. And that has long been a guiding principle, but it's when you go through loss, you're kind of like, it's almost like you're reacquainted with these principles you might have drifted away from a little bit. You're like, okay, yeah, that's what matters. And then also, you start to think about things that these photographs have these hidden messages in them. We've kind of talked about this before. Like, I think there's these wisdom moments. There's a quote by Emerson, one of the end of his books, where he says, all good books require that we must set them down and begin to live on their hint. And I believe this with photographs too, but first books. What he's saying is like, you're not reading a book just to be entertained. Like eventually you're done, set it down, and then live in a different way because of something you've gained here. And of course, when your father dies and you're looking at these old photos of him and remembering these stories, and maybe I'll tell just two small ones, you realize, okay, this isn't just like, oh, great photo of dad. It's like, who was he? And how do I want to live? And so my dad had this, he was really gritty, really resilient, really strong. Physically, he was born with club feet, didn't walk for 5 years. That didn't slow him down. He was on a job site once. He was a builder. This guy was getting electrocuted and would have died. And my dad ran and tackled him off of the electrical current. And that's like just how my dad rolled. I thought like all dads did that kind of stuff. There's another incident. He's in this really rough part of town. Gunman comes in to rob the market, and there's this mop and water bucket on the ground, and he throws the water bucket at the guy. And the guy's like so shocked and soaking wet, he like runs out of the place with his tail between his legs, you know. And he wouldn't just do this, in risky situations. This will be my last story, but he was dropping something off from one of his workers, and when you're a builder and a contractor, you have a lot of people working for you that are really paycheck to paycheck. And so he was dropping something off for this guy. It was Christmas time, and he noticed there was no Christmas tree. And so he's like, "Hey, where's the tree?" And the guy said, "Oh, we're kind of stuck. We didn't have enough money for the tree and the presents. So we asked our kids, and of course they chose presents." And so my dad left and bought a tree and lights, put it on the door, rang the doorbell, and ran. And these stories I would have to like drag out of him. And I would get these stories when we were remodeling my previous home together, swinging hammers and stuff. So the whole point is my dad was a pretty epic guy. And so then when I'm looking at these photos, I'm able to re-access those stories. But then eventually it's like my dad's life's over, to set that book down. And then ask myself, how do I want to live on that hint? How do I want to cultivate maybe that kind of resilience? He had a very strong faith and connection to his faith community. He was incredible work ethic. He was always one of the things my sister said is she's in her whole life she never left him a voicemail, and the reason was he would never let it go to voicemail. Whenever she called, picked it up. No interruption, no problem. He would be in the middle of these job sites, and he would do it for me too, because he would be like, "Oh, I can talk to you later." He's like, "Oh no, let me just move away." You're on the jackhammers and stuff. And he had a home office, and I would walk into his office, and he never once was like, "Christopher, like, look, I'm doing like this something, like, leave me alone," And I do that with my own kids in my own way. Like something's happening, but he always would just be like. He would give us the moment. He would give us the beat. He would answer the call. So anyway, and I know some people are like, "Well, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad and stuff like that." I get that too, and I honor and respect that. So I'm not saying this is all about dad, but in my case, this is where I'm at with this situation. So the point being is that the other thing I've really come to have clarity is that I want to create and have and be surrounded with photographs that require me, like good books, to set them down and live in a certain way. Because if it isn't affecting how I live, what's kind of the point?
Yeah.
And so that's been a beautiful gift, again, in this grief, again, going back to the beginning where I was saying I want to go a little dark, and it's not like dark, but it's like, I want to go into the grief. I want to sit with it. I want to ask it like, okay, what are you trying to teach me here? And those two kind of principles are these new like foundation for my photography. Where it will go, I have no idea. But that again is the uncertainty of our craft. If I knew, I don't think it would be as interesting. It's not like, well, now I'm going to go like, do some project. Right now, I'm more settling, slowing, listening, and then as I do photography, letting it come from my heart and making sure that's there. What does that make you think of, Derek? I'm laughing because it's so funny to like talk for so long and and have all these thoughts, but yeah, and sometimes I don't even know my own thoughts, but it's helpful to hear your reflections on them or what it triggers for you.
When we and I love, I just want to throw it out there before
Yeah.
I talk, is that I love that this is a space where you can feel comfortable
Yeah.
to open up. Because, as
Yeah.
you had said earlier, it's like, we've only talked via text, and
Right.
I don't even know if we've had a quick phone call lately. It's
Right.
like, since your father passed, and we haven't had that chance to really
Right.
talk. And it's like, I want to give you your space. And then it's like, people, you have to allow people space to grieve, and there's
Right.
a whole lot going on just in the logistical aspects and family and all this. So
Yes. Yes.
I appreciate you coming on here and being so vulnerable with us,
Yeah.
and having that space and comfortability to open up with us and our audience, because I know that is hard. And our team, we love you, Chris, and we extend
I
our
feel that.
deepest sympathies
Yes.
and condolences
Yes.
for you and your family, and appreciate the relationship that you've cultivated with us as a whole. I know we
Yeah.
always know when you're coming on, it's going to be like, yes, it's Chris is going on. It's going to be good
Yes.
vibes. And as per usual, whenever you talk, it's like I'm sitting here and it's like I have to, like, you make me want to start thinking and diving into things as I'm listening. It's like this constant, it's like so much wisdom coming out, but you also open up so many more doors. And it's funny, one of the doors you opened as you were talking,
Yeah.
and this is quick little story, and then I'm going to bounce it back to you for a
Yeah.
question I have for
Yeah.
you. Is, school picture, we're recently, and my wife is preparing all these outfits, and I'm over here doing work, and she's sending my son out. Do you like this outfit? Do you like this outfit? And my son and my wife. My wife has a great fashion sense, and my
Yeah.
son, he's a little model. He
Yeah.
wears these outfits so well, but none of them were him to
Hmm.
me. And I pulled my wife over, and it's like, we're gonna communicate. We're not gonna make
Yeah.
this.
Sure.
And I said, you know, you can call me crazy. We'll have a discussion. We'll communicate like adults. Said my personal stance is I always liked, and he's at the age now, he's second grade. He's starting to assert himself and develop his own personality. It's not
Yeah.
like he's kindergarten and it's like we have to help him get dressed and everything. He'll wake up in the morning and be like, "Well, I have basketball today at gym. I want to wear, a basketball
Right.
uniform."
Cool. Cool.
So I told her, I said, me, looking back at my family photos, big family. So it was always like the joke, hey, this person was wearing this shirt in their eighth grade photo. And then like 3 years later, someone's wearing
Oh,
it in
I
like their
love it. Yeah.
third grade
Yeah.
photo. And it's like the hand me down era. I feel like we don't have
Yeah.
hand me downs anymore, but
Yeah.
that was always a big thing. And it was always a demarcation of where that person was at in their life, what
Yeah.
phase, how they
Yes.
dressed, what kind of
Yes.
things they were into. My sister,
Totally.
she's probably the perfect example to drive this point home. Is she was a tomboy growing up.
Yeah.
So it was like those pictures where she was in boys sneakers and jeans, and she didn't wear dresses and skirts. That was an era that she had. And then
Yes.
obviously she moved through that, and everybody had their
Yes.
eras and their phases. And
Yes.
how do we remember them? How do we put a timestamp on them? We put a
Yeah.
timestamp on through images and looking at, oh, I can look at my grade kindergarten through 12th grade school photos and decide what I was into, and be able to get a
Yes.
glimpse into who I was that year or during that era. So I'd explain this to my wife, and of course she thinks I'm crazy.
Yeah. You
And
are
she's
crazy.
like, a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah. 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 We all are.
we all
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like I want him to at least, like, let's compromise. Cause ultimately she wasn't seeing the way I'm like,
Yeah.
let me
Sure.
let him pick his outfit. But then,
Yeah.
she wasn't
Yeah.
feeling that. So I was like, let's
Okay.
compromise. I want
Yeah.
him to at least have a say. I want him to have
Yeah.
some stamp or
Sure.
mark of his personality in that photo,
Right.
to where he can look back one day and say, "Oh, well, if he picks a Pokemon shirt, okay, that's when
Yeah.
I was really into Pokemon." And next
Yes.
year it might be into something else. I look back at
Yeah.
my old, there's a couple years I wore New York Yankees t-shirts, and I see nothing's changed in 43 years.
Yeah.
But I knew during that time, it's like, okay, wow. So I was a Yankees fan early, and I was a diehard
Right.
fan. So I flipped that back onto you. Those images, did you go through, and are there images that jump out to you for a certain reason? And I kind of look at this in like this universal, when
Sure.
you're trying to get better at photography, when you're trying to find more purposes, when you hit a plateau where you're like, my images aren't
Mhm.
really delivering. They're not making me feel anything. And I found, and this is something that I tell my mentees, my friends, my people I talk to, that well, find images that you like, find images that you do feel something when you look at,
Mm.
and reverse engineer, break them down, deconstruct them, and find what is it you like
Yes.
about them.
Yes.
What do you feel, and why do you feel?
Yeah.
When you look at the images, and as you're going through images of your father
Yeah.
and family images, are
Yeah.
there images that make you feel way different or make you feel more? And have you looked into why you feel a
Yes.
certain way?
Yes.
And can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about
Yes.
that?
Yes, I love this. And I love hearing how you navigate that. You know, it's, I imagine it's hard to be married to a photographer, right? Like, I mean, we could get our wives on and they could probably tell the world that. Um, we think about all these things or whatever. But yeah, two kind of thoughts here. One kind of unexpected, but again, I like the idea of opening doors, and I love how I feel like our conversation does that for each other. But you know, when your dad dies, you go through his iPhone because you're kind of looking at what are the communication that we need to do. And then I was looking through his photos, and his most recent photos, and there were some from like a construction job site. And then there's this photo of this beautiful blonde woman in a bikini, but it's not what you think. It's my mom. And my mom she's turning 80 in February. She still rocks a bikini. It's so great. But and it's just that, and there's a couple photos they had gone to the beach, you know, like a week before he passed. And but I was thinking, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, but was looking, I was like, I looked through all the photos and there were a lot of surprises. One was how many photos my dad took of my mom. So again, I was just like, wow, like he like really loved her in this way. And so like the whole idea of love and photos, looking at the photos, obviously I've already talked about not my dad's, but just those other ones, like where there is a sense of connection. I think there's like maybe there's connection, kindness, love, all those things. Sometimes it's different varying degrees of that. And then the other, so there's that I've already talked about. Um, but then the biggest surprise to me was the more idiosyncratic the photo was, the more interesting or meaningful, or the more the people responded to it in the slideshow. So my dad dressed as a clown with a huge wig, holding my daughter, who was like one, dressed as an elephant, you know, like it's just so awesome. Or the picture of my brother and I, where I have a really epic mullet, like if I do say so myself, you know, I like had the best mullet. Or then there's the photo when I cut off the mullet and just left the rat tail, and you can see the rat tail, and we're wearing some weird clothes. Or the one where my mom forced us to wear matching outfits, you know, like so it wasn't necessarily you know, because even that though, even though we hated it, it was like that photo was just so priceless because it was so idiosyncratic. It
Mhm.
was so, to your kind of point, it was so of that moment. Or my brother was like, bro, remember those shorts we had? Like we should have kept those. And, you know, or look how funny, like it was grandpa or my dad, you know, because look how funny grandpa was in this picture and whatever. So, and then I kind of thought about, well, does this relate to my work as a portrait photographer and what I tell people to wear? And I do have this thing I tell people. I say, you know, usually neutrals work well. Usually you don't have logos, but you always want to bring something that is unique or special or different or some kind of character element. And I think this helped me realize that is really important. You know, like, yes, there's certain kind of things that photographically like read better on camera, but also like we want images where someone is totally themselves, you
Yeah.
know, and in case, you know, maybe with your son's photo, maybe this will be the photo he'll look back on where like mom made me wear that outfit in second grade. That will be fun and funny because of that. Or maybe it'll be this was the time when I got to dress myself and I wore PJs in the class picture or whatever. That would be funny, equally as fun and funny. But just to back to what you said, and maybe this is where we wrap it up, is to allow the humanity of it all to enter into your frames, to not control things too much. And that's kind of part of the joy and fun of being alive, you know. And I think as photographers, back to the photo, I kind of drifted off that. Like I got it, these are the certain things, these are my rules, this, you know, and it's like, yes, but let's keep that humanity and that heart in the mix. So
Wow.
yeah. And it's and thank you too. And last little thought is just for, and I thank you for this community for a chance to share things like this. And I was, it really comes from my mentors, like, don't waste these moments. And I think collectively, because we're all going through different things, and it it would have felt very insincere. You know, I have other talks created and guests and stuff, but it would have felt very insincere to do that with this going on. And I think what loss does is like, no, we got to be who we are, people, you know. And with my friends, you know, if I say how you're doing, if they aren't doing well, I want to hear that. I don't want to hear, yeah, life's great, you know, and let me show you my new camera, you know. It's like, really? So yeah, so I appreciate what B&H does, cultivating this real approach to photography. How do we really do this? How do we really get better? Who are we as people? What stage of life? Young, old, doesn't matter, you know, and all these things, and it takes us through. So I'm so grateful to be part of the community and the crew there. And this is like a highlight of my life, man. So love it.
We love it, all of us, from me to
Yeah,
Stephanie, Fred,
yeah,
Danny, Splash
yeah,
Green,
yeah.
Blue,
Splash screen.
Splash Green.
We'll see if he does his job today, but
Look, we can be inspirational, we can be deep, thoughtful, and we
yeah.
can still be funny. I think
Yes.
humor is humor is something that, you know, it provides that levity to life,
Yes.
and you know,
Yes.
it's all a combination. And I think ultimately it's really about feeling and just really existing in the moment. You know, again, that's
Yeah.
why we're talking about the joy of the journey. And I think that's a beautiful thing, Chris. And nobody is in the moment like you. You're always present, and I love that.
Yeah. Likewise. Likewise.
Oh man,
I
another
appreciate
good
it.
convo.
Okay.
This one we
Yeah.
always.
Thank you for holding space, for doing it. Appreciate it.
No, no, definitely. It's always great to have you on. I mean, I don't have to say that. It's always I value whether we're on camera talking, off camera talking.
Yeah.
You know, it's always needed. And I hope all of our viewers really tap in and get something out of that as well.
Yeah.
It's like when you do reviews, and it's perspective. You know, a lot of what we talked
Yeah.
about in the dark side is really just about seeing perspective. It's if you're sitting in a critique
Yeah.
and your images aren't being critiqued, well, the perspective comes from being able to learn from other people's images. And
Yes. Yes.
in the dark side of this, you know, we talked about the dark side of the joy of the journey and all this, and it's like
Yes.
it's finding perspective. It's finding being able to find something bright from the dark side. So I want to thank you as always, Chris, for bringing that inspiration and that bright spot to the
Yes.
event space, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that is it. I always feel so zenned out after these, and
Mhm.
calm, and going to the rest of my day on a high note. Huge thank you, of course, to Sony Artisan of Imagery, Chris Orwig, and of course Sony for supporting this. They're a big supporter of what we do here, so we want to thank them as well for all their support in bringing the best of the best in the artisan community to our platform. So, on behalf of myself, Splash Green, and the rest of the gang, another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time. There we go.